Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I suppose this all started a few years ago when my son was being looked after by a born-again Christian childminder. He used to come home and tell me things about Jesus. Well, at the time I thought it was a little West Indian boy, because there was a lot of West Indian kids went to his childminders. And, you know, I just thought it was a lad that he was talking about. And I didn't need God. I was a self-made, very hard man. I was a serviceman. I always brought back the guys I took out, never ever left anybody behind. And I didn't need God. At least that's what I thought. One day I came home and during the night I'd been in rather a large fight in the student union of Manchester Polytechnic, and my fingers were all swollen here and black. And my son came downstairs, came out for his breakfast, and he said, just hold my hand, he said, can I pray for you? And I almost laughed. And I said, yeah. So he prayed for me, held onto my hand, and he went off to the childminders. I went to bed. When I got up, I noticed it had all gone down except for 2 red lines. And when I went round to pick him up, all the other kids there were there. He said, let's have a look at your hand, Dad. So I showed him. He said, oh, praise the Lord. I thought, this guy really believes in this. You know, it was something of a leap for me to understand that. I don't know if many of you can understand that. Having no God, and then seeing God works. It's amazing. Anyway, he kept telling me things that I'd learnt as a child when I went to church willingly. And that all stopped when I joined up at 15. And I had no form of religion or faith or anything up until then. Then he said to me, him and his friends were praying for me. And I said, well, I can't do any harm, can it? I think you'd be better off praying for somebody else. And one of the little girls there, she gave me a little booklet. It was called A Bridge to Life. It was only about this big. And it was a story of how God sent Jesus to earth as a bridge for mankind to get to heaven. Well, she said, will you promise to read it, Barney? And I said, yeah, I'll read it. And like all people, you put it in your pocket and you forget about it. Well, it ended up in my locker at work in Didsbury. And strange things were happening. I put all the kids in, I had one of these Fords, you know, with lots of seats. And I put all the kids in there with a couple of adults to take them to a picnic. And we had to pick up one other guy, the little disabled boy. And when we were on the way there, I heard somebody shout out, stop, so I stopped right in the middle of the road and looked round and said, what for? I thought one of the kids had opened a door or a window or something. And they all looked at me as if I was goo-goo. And even my son said, nobody said anything, Dad. I said, well, I heard somebody. He said, well, we didn't. Well, just as I was going to start off again, a car smashed into the wall just up the lane where we probably would have been if I hadn't stopped. So I did the 3-point turn, disappeared, and nobody said a word. It was like I'd gagged them all, you know. And nothing was said. I went and took them to their picnic, went and picked them up when I got woken up by a phone call, and nothing was said. Then I was coming home from work from Didsbury College, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I always used to go to one chap for petrol in a petrol station, which isn't there now, just under the motorway in Northenden. I don't know if any of you remember it. Well, I used to call in there, and he said he was shutting up business that morning So I said, right, I'll be there in the morning. And I took a few cans in the boot to take, to get some extra off him. Well, I got there, I filled up my tank and we filled up the cans in the boot. And I went in to pay him and say goodbye. And I said to him, if you ever get another job, I'll come and, pumping petrol, I'll come and be a customer of yours. And he said, that won't happen. He said, the wife won't let me. So I went out and got in the car, started it up, went to wave and then pull away, and I heard this shout, stop. And I looked back, couldn't see anything, and I turned the engine off, opened the door, walked back to him. And as I walked back to him, the concrete post, which weighed 20 tonne, fell across the way in front of my car. I would probably have been there if I hadn't have stopped. And there were sparks and everything from the electrics for it. And he called the fire brigade and everybody else. And they all turned up. And there's a policeman there said, what happened? I said, well, he shouted. He said, I didn't. I said, you did? He said, I didn't. I said, I did. And it almost ended up in a punch-up between the two of us. And the copper got in between us. For some unknown reason, he said, you stopped. I said, yeah. Anyway, the two fire engines eventually managed to tow this thing out of the way, and I went home. And I thought, well, these strange things are happening, and I don't know why. A few weeks later, I'm at Disbury College again, and we were having trouble with the swimming pool chemicals. The machine that never breaks down had broken down again. And we were going out to top it up by hand, and do the tests to make sure it was fit for people to use the next day. Well, I'd done the tests and topped it up. And I came out, signed the book and everything, came out, set the alarm, and I stood there on the steps and lit a cigarette. And this voice said, how can I prove it, that I exist? And I said, show me in a way that only I will understand. Well, I've been a serviceman all my life, and I used to read the weather faster and better than any weather forecaster. And the guys always used to ring me up when they came on duty and say, what do we wear tonight, Barney? And I said that night, shirt sleeve order, it's going to be warm and dry all night. So I turned left, marched around the front of the swimming pool, checked the dinghy store, the canoe store, and the sailing box we had there. Walked round the back of the building, and all of a sudden I could hear my radio, Disbury Mobile, and it was like, in the next room. And I suddenly woke up and I'm there, laying on my stomach, and I'm soaking wet. I think, so I went and picked my radio up, and they said, where have you been? And I said, I've just done the swimming pool. No, you haven't, you did that 2 hours ago. And I said, well, I don't know where I've been. I said, but hang on, I'll give you a ring from the lodge. So I went and picked my hat up and shook the water out of it and looked, and the lawn next to the greenhouse was wet. Half the greenhouse was wet with rain. And then it stopped. There was a line across the path. And I turned round and this voice said, you asked? Well, I'll tell you now. I could have overtaken Roger Bannister and Chris Basher on the way to that lodge. I got through that door, I slammed the door, put the chain on, put the two locks on. And my heart's doing this. And I took my gear off and put it on. I had to put the heating on, put my gear on the radiator, and I've stood there in my underpants and my socks. And the lads I speak to on the phone downtown, and they say, what do you mean you got wet? I said, I got wet in that rain. He said, it hasn't rained. I said, yes it has. He said, hasn't. He said, you drunk, you skunk, you fell in the pond. No, I did used to drink an awful lot, but very rarely when I was on duty. Anyway, I thought I'd convinced them that, I had got wet in the rain. And about 20 minutes later, they turned up there. So I put my gear on, and I actually put a Mac on that I had in the boot, an old service Burberry. and went over to where this had happened, and I said, this is where it happened, this is where I got wet. And you could see my silhouette on the cobbles. And I took one look at that, one look at the greenhouse, one look at me, and I'll tell you what, I didn't know those guys could run that fast. They were back in the van at the lodge before I got round the first corner. So I got back and they checked the pond, which is covered in green algae, so I couldn't have got in there because I was all perfectly clean. So they shot off, and I went to my locker to get something to read while the rest of my stuff dried, and there's this little book, and I got it out and I flicked through it, read it, and it's a story of how God sent Jesus to earth as a bridge for mankind to get to heaven. And in the back it's this prayer of salvation. And it was weird, it was like somebody was saying, do it, do it. So I read it, picked up a pen, put my name in, time, date, place, and did the prayer, and then signed it. It was a prayer of salvation. I looked, do I phone anybody or write to anybody or what, There's nothing, once you've done it, that's it. Well, they came back after a few minutes and said, have you looked at your car? I said, no. So where did you get your Mac from? I said, in the boot. So come on out and have a look. And the car was bone dry. There'd been no rain anywhere near the lodge. And that's when they started getting very creepy and legged it. Shot off downtown. And I went in and I read this book again, and the prayer I'd done. I thought, well, that's it. I believe you. I went home. I went in the house, sat down for my breakfast. My wife gave me my breakfast. And Richard come bumbling downstairs. And he came in and he said, hi, and he touched me on the face, and he's not one of those kids who touches people, it's a gesture. But he went like that, hi. So I grabbed his wrist, I said, what have you done? Thinking he's put his foot through something or, broken something. And he said, you know Jesus. And I was that gobsmacked. I sat there in my mouth and I said, what did you say? He said, you know Jesus. I said, how do you know that? He said, he told me last night. I went to bed. I couldn't sleep. I went and got my mum's old Bible out and started reading that. I just couldn't get my head around it. And I went and picked him up. I don't think I'd had more than about 2 or 3 minutes sleep. And I went and picked him up, and the whole gang was there. Everybody in the house was there and welcomed me to the kingdom. All big hugs, kisses, and and I was just overwhelmed. I later found out that we had to get a childminder. I knew that, but my wife had got a list of childminders from the local council, approved and vetted and all that. And she'd gone around and she crossed off all the names that weren't English, all the addresses she didn't like, right? And then when we were driving around, she was saying, oh no, she's got dirty curtains, mucky front door. And she ended up with 13 names on this 5 sheets of foolscap. So she made appointments to see 10 of them. And this was on my day off she was going to do this. I think I had an hour's sleep or something like that. And got up and we went in the car to go up to this lady across Hale Road. There had been an accident, and there had been a multiple, and there were bits of evidence everywhere, you know what I mean? The police had closed the whole area off. So we couldn't get up the road, we couldn't get back down the road because people parked behind us. So I just pulled in. And I said, haven't you got another lady to see in Beach Road? And because we were in Beach Road. She said, yeah. She said, but that's not for an hour. I said, oh, come in, give us the address. And I went and knocked on her door. And I said, my wife's going to bring Richard round to see you. And she said, well, who are you? I said, I'm Richard's dad, Vanessa's husband. She said, well, go and get Richard and Vanessa, I'm not interested in you. So I said, fair enough. And went and got them, and they went in like, and Richard was in there with the kids like he'd known them all his life. I don't think he'd met more than 2 or 3 of them ever before. So my wife turned around and said, well, he's happy, isn't he? I said, yeah. So Heather, the lady, house it was, said, do you want to go around and see anybody else? She said, because I'm happy with him. All the kids are friendly with him. My wife said, well, we've got other people to see. And she said, well, tell me who they are and I'll call them and tell them you don't need to. So I thought, that's a bit strange, but still. She picked up the phone. It was one of those on a post, in the kitchen wall. And she just phoned this number. Hello, Debbie. They won't be here today. I'm taking Richard. Who's the next one? And she dialed 4 people, one after the other. I thought, how does she know these numbers like this? And I later found out all 13 people my wife had picked on that list were born-again Christians. Right? I didn't know this for years. All 10 of the ladies she made appointments with were all in the same prayer group. Yeah. Creepy, isn't it? That's God creeping up on you. And, well, like I said, from then on it's been great. My son's grown up into a nice young man. He joined the tribe of Judah like I did. And he's now the president of the UK chapter. And I keep saying to people, if I had a daughter and she brought him home, I'd be well pleased. That's the sort of man he is, Instantly like him. Anyway, that's my story. And I thank Jesus every day. And I've seen some awesome healings. I was at the Bulldog Bash just a few weeks ago, which is the Hells Angels National Rally in England, down at Stratford. That's Stratford Raceway. And a guy came up to us and said, do you remember me? I said, I remember your eyes. I said, but, refresh my memory. He said, I was that big fat bloke with the crutches and 2 mates to help me to carry me around. I said, oh yeah. He said, I did what you said, prayed. He said, and I know you lot prayed for me. He said, and here I am now, 9 3/4 stone lighter. On his own feet with no sticks. Yeah, wow. And he regularly attends a good church, a live church, But that's my story. Any questions? No? Thank you all for listening for me.